Weirding Way Media.
Speaking of terrible movies, Father Malone, how dare you come into the sanctorum of this show and bring a dreaded piece of muck from the made-for-television dungeon, ladies and gentlemen. Holy moly. It's a Tom Hanks movie, though, folks.
You know what? You said, do you want to come on into a Tom Hanks movie? You said, what Tom Hanks movie? I said, hey, Mazes and Monsters. I haven't seen it in some time. Saw it when I was very young. Saw it the last time I saw this movie was like 25 years ago, and HP came over to my house with a copy of it that he had somehow. I think it was the DVD when they finally released it on DVD. Yeah, and I had then vividly remembered the opening and then completely forgotten the whole rest of it, just like I had from my childhood.
It's such a memorable movie. I don't understand how you forgot.
I don't have to defend this movie, by the way.
No, I know you're not going to.
Oh, no.
It is about as indefensible as it comes. Like,
virtually not at all. I can tell you like the little nostalgic things I like about it, but like it's not great.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, often we're not necessarily watching movies that are bad, but it's fun to watch a movie that's, I think, subjectively and objectively bad, which this movie is. And on this episode of the Culture Cast, I'm still your host, Chris Dashy, much to the chagrin of many. Who those many are, we may never know. But I am also joined by my friend from a destination that's quite dark. He says goodnight, Mr. Walters, sometimes. He's one half of Wolf and Raisin, your friend and mine, Father Malone.
There's blood on my knife.
I swear to God. Everything Tom Hanks says in the last hour of this movie is so bad. It's beyond reproach, I think, is the word I would use.
When I was in grade school, that is something me and my little asshole friends would say to each other every once in a while, because we all had seen the movie. I have blood on my knife. We'd all cackle.
Boy, if you're tuning in because you want to hear us talk about a Tom Hanks movie, this technically does check the box. We're talking about Tom Hanks's, I guess, first, and it's not technically his first credit. I think there was one other thing before this, but his early credit, the 1982 made-for-television film produced by Procter & Gamble, based on Rona Jaffe's book, Mazes and Monsters.
Tom Hanks and his friends get caught up in a deadly game of fantasy.
I am the maze controller.
Until they take it too far.
I propose we play Mazes and Monsters in a real setting. It won't be a fantasy.
Too bad for one of them, because now there's no turning back.
This is only a game.
I know, I killed somebody.
Mazes and Monsters.
Saturday at 3 on ZTV, Fox 17.
So the film is written by Tom Lazarus, directed by Stephen Hillard Stern, and it stars a very young babyface Tom Hanks, Chris Makepeace, the mom from the Santa Claus, Wendy Crewson, and David Y. Saki, and also Murray Hamilton, who, I swear to God, the beach is not going to stay closed this year. Those Mazes and Monsters, they won't stop the beach from being closed.
Yeah, it's absolutely baffling that he shows up in this movie. You know who else is in this movie? Playing Tom Hanks's mom? That's Vera Miles. She was Lila Crane in Psycho.
Yeah.
When it comes to get Norman, and she's awesome in it.
So, Father Malone, you've kind of already mentioned your history with this movie, but before we talk about the film proper, what did you think of rewatching this film 25 plus years later?
Wow. It's not good is ultimately it. It is a wonderful time capsule of 1982 sort of fashion and location, but story-wise, I didn't find much of a story at all in this, which is weird because there was the bones of a good story in here if they wanted to tell it. Ultimately, what I found was a movie about Dungeons and Dragons written by somebody who knew nothing about it and was suspect of it, and put a lot of blame on it while at the same time showing what the actual problems were. Like, each of these characters are shown to have horrible home lives that are breaking them apart in some ways. But the problem in this narrative's opinion is the fact that they play this board game.
I think we could have actually, because you and I recently did an episode for Scary Stories We Tell, a Real Talk episode where we talked about autofocus and the unsolved murder of Bob Crane, which you can find over at weirdingwaymedia.com right now. I think we could have done an episode of this for that show and talked about the satanic panic of the 80s, because boy, what you're talking about is like the plot of this movie is Dungeons and Dragons is bad and it's making kids do bad things and nothing consequential happens. But then we have this weird, like, psychological thriller type thing tacked on the last third of the movie that ultimately goes nowhere and serves no purpose, because the movie is very clearly delineated. Like, the first half and the second half are very clearly delineated by the return to the beginning of the movie. But this is just the strangest thing I've ever seen, because you could watch this as like a piece to inform you why Dungeons and Dragons was treated the way it was on Stranger Things. If you're someone who is trying to understand where that's coming from, here's a weird artifact of what they were actually feeling at the time. Because Rona Jaffe's book is based off of literal bullshit. Just like Michelle Remembers, just like the West Memphis 3, just like half of all of the satanic panic shit. I can't say all because there's one or two things that prove the rule, but most of the satanic panic stuff from the 80s was exactly that, a panic that had nothing actually going on. And this kind of stuff, specifically this movie, feeds right into it. Yeah, mazes and monsters. How subtle are you? Even the fucking name alone is as unsubtle as it gets.
There's no dungeon master here. There's a maze controller. This isn't Dungeons and Dragons. It's mazes and monsters. It's totally different. McDowell's, McDonald's. See, there's a difference. I would like to point out, though, the game of mazes and monsters that they're playing looks like the most boring. It looks like what happens, again, you've probably seen this now as someone who I know plays video games. When people play video games in movies, that's what this is for Dungeons and Dragons. It's like the equivalent of pressing all the buttons and staring at the screen and pretending you know what you're doing. This is the same thing. When they're playing it, the actual board game, it looks like the most boring game known to man. Like, I don't even understand what they're actually playing. There's no pieces. There's no components. There's their like figures and a board with squares on it. What the actual fuck is this? No dice, by the way.
No, they show the dice, remember?
Right. But every time anyone is doing anything, they're not using them.
Right. Again, they don't understand what the mechanic of Dungeons and Dragons even is.
One of our lead characters says, I'm going to jump into this pit, and there are no dice thrown, and they just say, yeah, you're dead. That's not how the game works.
You don't understand. It's a demonic game that causes kids to go crazy. Because Tom Hanks in this movie was schizophrenic before he played Mazes and Monsters. The game did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. It did nothing. He's schizophrenic either way. Like or has some mental condition. The movie can't figure out what his deal is.
And there were cases back in the 80s, and the one this was based on was the old Egbert case, right? Like, he disappeared at the University of Michigan, and he like basically went into a steam tunnel and shot himself or killed himself. I don't know how he actually committed suicide, but that's where he was. But there were rumors that there had been live action D&D play in those tunnels, and he had been a participant in them. So clearly he was murdered or killed himself because of his involvement with Dungeons and Dragons. Meanwhile, all over the country, Christian groups are like linking it to demons and wizardry and witchcraft and Satanism. It's just like the silliest thing. This movie itself, this movie doesn't traffic at all in the satanic panic of Dungeons and Dragons, but it traffics heavily in these are broken people play this game. People who need to escape. They are looking to get out of reality and into another headspace. What would these Christians group have done with fucking VR helmets? Satan made microchips? Like,
the thing for my generation when we were growing up was Harry Potter. I mean, it was the exact same thing as Dungeons and Dragons for people when you were growing up, right? It's like, it's the devil. It's like, it's a fucking book written by a terrible human being, but nobody knew that at the time. So it was, you were hating Harry Potter because it was demonic or satanic or whatever bullshit. It's a fucking book. Calm down. Just like Dungeons and Dragons is just a board game. Calm down. Like, chill out. People who read a book and believe in someone that doesn't exist as well.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Calm down. Like, if you can have your fun, can't we have ours?
I had a talk with the big invisible man who lives in the sky. He said these books are cool. Is that good with you now?
My maze controller disagrees.
Yeah.
Jesus is or I guess God is the ultimate maze controller. Not that it matters because Jesus and God are the same person, I guess.
Not in the world of mazes and monsters.
God. Oh my God. Can we talk about Tom Hanks in this movie? So Tom Hanks plays Robbie. He has a mental health condition that is undiagnosed. Clearly. And he goes to a university where he meets Chris Makepeace, who is a suicidal college kid.
Yeah.
And then Wendy Crewson plays, I guess, just a normal person. Like, I don't understand.
She's the normal one.
Right. And then David Wysocki is trying to escape from the shadow of his father, who he doesn't want to be like. And ladies and gentlemen, you've got your entire story laid out for you. Important
details. Robbie was attending Tufts. So he was at a medical school and got bounced because he wasn't paying enough attention to his classes because he was playing mazes and monsters. Right?
Right.
Okay. The blonde kid, Daniel, the one trying to get out of his father's shadow, is also like he's studying to be a software engineer, computer engineer, but he really wants to make video games, which his parents are like, there's no future in that, which then felt silly that they were saying it to him, but now really feels silly that they were saying it to him.
He wants to work in the private sector where they expect results.
Right.
That's what it felt like. By the end of the movie, when he's like, I'm going to go work in software. It's like, okay, you dope. Like, okay, you dope. Like,
we'll get to that ending.
Oh, that's the best part of the movie. Everything is the best part of this movie.
Yeah. I
think Chris Makepeace's character, who is suicidal from the moment we meet him, because his mother doesn't love him or doesn't care.
Right. And his character, I think they say at some point, is 16.
Right. He's a head. He's a child savant, right?
Right. So he's a 16-year-old sophomore in college. These are all sophomores in college. So they're all like 19 years old, right? Except for Chris Makepeace, who is 16. And in an effort to win over what must be a gulf between him and the other students who are, adults while he is still effectively a child, he does this by wearing silly hats in every scene in the movie.
Yes.
An affectation that, listen, I share. I dig a good chapeau. I wore a top hat in high school. I get it. But here's the thing. If you're going to wear a pith helmet, you better be dressed like you're on a safari. Like wearing a pith helmet with your like little sweater and your penny loafers. It's just, I don't know. I just wanted to punch him in the face every single time. Also, Chris Makepeace, not that good an actor. I'm not surprised he didn't last much further than this. I saw him, I think maybe on a 21 Jump Street a few years later, but I hadn't seen much of him since. I know people are going to go, oh, but Meatballs, but Bodyguard. Yeah. He's not a good actor.
I have not seen either of his other films that he is quote unquote known for, but I will tell you with no amount of uncertainty that I agree. He is the wrong choice for the lead of this movie, but I don't think anybody would have been the right choice. Maybe Wendy Crewson.
Tom Hanks would have been good in the Chris Makepeace role.
Right. But that's a different movie.
Charming as fuck.
I was more speaking to what this movie is if it is the way it is now. I agree. Obviously, the people who made this movie regret not flipping the two.
Yeah. Although Tom Hanks got the juicier part.
I think he got the more interesting role, but I think he got the less Hanksian role, but he wasn't the Tom Hanks of now then.
Right. This is, by the way, not his first role. He had a string of roles before this, including, I think, 2 seasons on Bosom Buddies on ABC. like when that got canceled, this is like the next thing he did. This was a CBS movie from 1982. By the way, I sent you the picture of it because I got so excited during the credit sequence in this film where it's just shots of driving through downtown New York. There's a marquee showing Creepshow. Yeah, that was nice to see. Also, yellow credits. I get it. It's bold and they're beautiful. I understand why Tarantino uses them. They're always striking when you can see a yellow credit.
It's because he likes Mazes and Monsters so much.
I bet he would never have shut up about the movie if that were the case. So.
Yeah, that's fair. God. Oof. And I think when you're talking about Tom Hanks, because, we've obviously talked about him, you and I already have once this month with The Burbs. That movie comes out 5 years, right? It's 87. The Burbs comes out, right? 89. So 7 years after this?
88. Yeah, something like that. Not very far.
Man, and I know what Splash came out, 2 years after this?
Next year. Next year. Tom Hanks started the 80s on a roll that just kept a rolling.
This was not a rolling spot. This is a...
I'm transitioning from wacky characters to feature films, and I'll do it through a TV movie where it's not funny at all. Not even remote.
And I didn't...
Not even when I try.
Did they ever try to be funny?
Chris Makepeace's wacky hats were supposed to be mirthful.
Yes. Honestly, I think my biggest criticism for this movie is it's just kind of boring. That I think is because, again, I think we kind of already touched on it a little bit. I don't think the idea behind this movie is one that isn't worth discussing. And I'm not talking about the mazes and monsters making kids do and be worse than they already are. That's bullshit psychology. It's the same. It's literally the same. Oh, video games cause violent shit. Same fucking thing. They did it.
Movies.
Right.
Slasher movies are going to make them all desensitized. They're going to start killing each other.
Columbine was because they played Doom. Wrong answer. Columbine was a lot of things. Just like Dungeons and Dragons didn't make kids go do any of this shit. Bad psychology is bad psychology. All that aside, you can tell an interesting story with the other stuff that they talk about, with people getting too lost in the game, which is just an obsessive thing. And it could just be because they're obsessives, not because the game is doing anything. Because again, you could be an obsessive about fucking golf. You could be an obsessive about anything. If it's a hobby or hobby adjacent, you could be an obsessive. There are people that are obsessives about Beanie Babies, all kinds of stuff. So I don't understand. I mean, I understand why, because again, Rona Jaffe's book was leaning on that. But I think the more interesting story would have been just these are four obsessives who meet one another and get lost in a fantasy world, like Bridge to Terabithia.
Right. Or Heavenly Creatures. It could have been.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah, it could have been magnificent, but the fact is there is no story going on here, really. There's
not a story in this movie at all, frankly.
It's glacially paced, and that's with many montages supposing that we're traveling through time. The movie you and I are talking about right now, the fantasy world with people getting lost in their own obsessions, is not in any way this movie. This movie just sort of hints at it. I do feel, having classified the movie as sort of Dungeons and Dragons, bashing, I actually feel like it's not, it doesn't play it even-handed, but it doesn't seem to be pointing its finger at the game so much as these kids and their problems, Right. It's not saying it doesn't feel like a warning for parents. It feels like a story about these kids who have a friend who loses his mind and they're all lost themselves and they're trapped in whatever.
And Mazes and Monsters is just the thing that brings them together.
Exactly.
Because realistically, if it was Frisbee golf, you can't have someone hallucinating a giant Minotaur monster while playing Frisbee golf. But you can if it's Mazes and Monsters.
Right. And what was the Corgill? The
Corgill, yeah.
There's a Corgill. The Corgill, by the way, played by Kevin Peter Hall, the Predator.
Yeah, well, technically the second Predator. Never forget the original casting of the Predator.
I know, in that goofy little orange costume.
Hey, man, they don't want us to forget about it when they put it in that Predator, and I don't want to forget about it either.
That's not. But you know what? What's funny is it feels like, it was a goofy-looking orange thing, but they were going to do something with it, right?
I assume it was going to have him fist fight Schwarzenegger, right?
Yeah, I know, but wasn't there going to be some visual effect laid on top of it? It wasn't going to look like that.
I would hope not.
Right, because because that's how they kind of make it seem in that documentary. But then, like when you watch something like The Death of Superman Lives, what they talk about how when the set photos, or not the set photos, but the test photos of Nicolas Cage in those Superman outfits, like, oh my God, look how terrible it is. What the fuck are they doing over there? And they're like, that was supposed to be like one scene for like 30 seconds. Like, I don't know.
It's called not understanding how movies are made. Hero prop? What does that mean? I'll tell you what, those caves were definitely not a set in this movie. The mysterious forbidden Pequod Caverns, as Chris Makepeace says at the beginning of the movie, in one of the funnier lines, I shouldn't go to the mysterious forbidden Pequod Caverns. Yeah, I guess not, Lil Opie.
I like that they gave him a minor bird who talks. I'm pretty sure that was Frank Welker doing the vocalizations, because Frank Welker did the voice of every animal in the 1980s.
I mean, he still does, doesn't he?
Birds can't talk. But, yeah, basically. But they gave him this minor bird so that he could kind of just monologue and like let us know all of his thoughts. Like he's just talking to the bird. Birdie, what do you think I should do? What's the name of the bird? Who cares?
I like that at one point Murray Hamilton talks to the bird.
Oh, what kind of a bird is this? Bird can't talk. And he seems genuinely delighted by that bird. Vera Miles, because you brought Murray Hamilton, and like occasionally I think of this movie and I think of the talent on display, and they're giving nothing to do, and it kind of shocks me. But when Vera Miles is playing Robbie, Tom Hanks's mom, and they're driving to the new college, and his father is yelling at the mother because she's drunk. He's like, I hate when you drink. And she's like, I drink to get through the day. It's right.
It is like so depressing.
Oh my God, it's so bad. And Tom Hanks just sitting back there, like his eyes ping ponging between these two horrible parents. But what I love is Vera Miles comes off sort of clipped and angry, but not drunk, while the husband is saying you're drunk. But when they get out of the car and it's just her and Tom Hanks, she's clearly drunk. It's a great performance in just like 2 minutes, because you can, when you're drunk and people are like, you're drunk and you're an asshole. And you're like, well, no, I'm not drunk. I might be an asshole, but I'm not drunk. Like that sort of, you can sort of maintain a level of sobriety. And that's what she's doing in the car. And then once she gets out, she can let it go because it's her son. Great. I don't know. That's the best thing in the movie for me, was that one scene, and that one performance knocked me out.
I like that Peter Donat shows up in this movie, who I can only think of as one person ever. And that's Mulder's father from the X-Files.
Yeah. Pops Mulder shows up
every time.
He's yelling at he's the computer engineer nerds father, right?
Yeah. Just an asshole father too. Just like the most asshole 80s father possible.
That's good, son. That's a hobby you can have, but you got to make the money. His son, Daniel, computer nerd, is supposed to be like this heartthrob character, this lady killer, right?
Theoretically.
We know this because they tell us.
Theoretically.
And we find out like halfway through the movie, and I'm like, oh, is that what he's supposed to be? Maybe a scene demonstrating that might have been in order.
I mean, I think that's the issue. Is I don't understand what the appeal of David Wysocki and Chris Makepeace was. Like, what did they see from them when they were cast that thought that they were it doesn't even feel like they're the right actors for the parts.
Well, I will say, look, Meatballs was a big hit, and My Bodyguard was a moderate hit. And so they effectively, for their lead, had a movie star. That's why Chris Makepeace got cast. I don't know about the other kid. I would have thought it would be someone more attractive. Maybe he was very attractive for the time period. But then again, I was alive in the time period, and I don't find him attractive. I don't know. Maybe he's just not my type. Point being.
That went all around the way. I did not expect it to go there.
Back. That character. Had he been just sort of like really attractive, it would have made sense when he confesses the thing that bothers him most is that he can't find a girl because they all think he's a lady killer and they won't give him the time of day. I would have said, oh, okay, I got it. I got who this guy is. Whereas when that guy said it, I went, really?
You look like one of the Partridge Family.
Yeah.
Well, he just looks kind of like a dope. I mean, again, like that's the thing about David Wysocki is like he's supposed to not be a dope, and yet he comes off as a total dope in this movie. And I don't I don't understand the leads being as not unlikable, but just uninteresting. They're just everything is so flat. The scene between David Wysocki and Wendy Crewson where they're eating dinner together, having a drink together. And she's like, yeah, we're not together anymore. Me and Tom Hanks. And he's like, oh, you mean that I can get in on that then? And it's like, what? Like, why would you find him attractive? Why would you be okay with any of this? I haven't seen anything in any of the scenes between any of these characters to think that they would actually like each other outside of playing Mazes and Monsters together.
Well, look, I think
there should be some chemistry, right?
Right. There should be massive chemistry. I think Tom Hanks gives a good performance. I think Wendy Crewson gives a good performance. Chris Makepeace does not. And I don't know about the other guy. But collectively, they have no chemistry at all. The scenes between Tom Hanks and Wendy Crewson are actually pretty good. And I think Tom Hanks is consistent throughout. Like when they go into Mazes and Monsters mode and he's playing his character, the cleric Pardue, like he seems like that guy. Like he's committed to it. And whereas the others don't. I don't know.
Well, and I mean, look, Wendy Crewson and Tom Hanks are still acting and in big things. I mean, David Wysocki as Chris Makepeace isn't anymore. So I think the quality of the actor speaks for themselves. I think Wendy Crewson is a fantastic character actor and Tom Hanks is who he is. He wasn't not Tom Hanks then. He wasn't just visibility wise the same Tom Hanks, but that actor was still in there. I clearly, if he's going to be in Splash the next year, it's the same guy, and that's the thing. That's probably the hardest thing about watching this movie is knowing that it's the material that's not good, at least in regard to Tom Hanks, because he can kill anything, even if he is the worst part of the new Elvis movie, which he totally is.
I agree with you 100%, but
that's normally not the case.
No, even if he's just sort of in it somewhere, he's doing a good thing.
Right.
He's certainly doing great here.
Have you seen The Circle, the Emma Watson movie that came out a couple years ago? Like it's like a social network movie.
I remember it coming out and I remember avoiding it.
So Tom Hanks in that movie plays like a Steve Jobs, Bezos, Elon Musk character. And he is the best part of that movie because he is perfect for that role. But that movie is atrocious. But he's totally the best part because he plays the role to perfection.
I would say the same thing about Saving Mr. Banks, where he plays Walt Disney and makes Disney a likable, genial, but not glossed over, not completely caricatured.
Right.
There's a real guy in there, and you can see there's a mind at work while exhibiting those other elements.
Man.
Tom Hanks, baby.
I like Tom Hanks. I really do.
Treebeck, motherfucker.
Yeah. We keep coming back to Dragnet.
How can we not? It's a city of crime out there.
A city of crime.
Tom Hanks, one of the credits is City of Crime.
I know. When we did the Volunteers episode, another movie where Tom Hanks is kind of the best part of the movie.
Oh my God. He's so good in that, actually. I don't really like that movie, but
what is there to like about that movie?
Are you doing The Money Pit? Have you done that?
I have not.
Oh my God, The Money Pit. So good.
Is it a good performance or a good movie?
Good performance, good movie, as far as I'm concerned. And I love Shelley Long. My heart belongs to Shelley Long.
Poor Shelley Long, though. Poor Shelley Long, though. Now,
no, we're not talking anything about Shelley Long.
The actress who used to act Shelley Long.
Yes, I'm talking about 1980 something 6 Money Pit.
Sure.
Came out.
Never seen it.
I saw it at a test screening in 1986. I was 13 years old. And at the time, the title was House Feathers. And I thought, what is that? And that's the first thing you got to fill out a little card. And I wrote, terrible title.
I mean, I don't know. The Money Pit's not a much better title.
No, they had one. Playing House was one of the options, and I think I checked that one. At least that's something.
Tom Hanks, man, I don't know if I don't know him turning in a bad performance is the most surprising thing he can do, frankly.
Yeah,
right.
I haven't seen him do it, honestly.
I mean, other than Elvis,
and
it's a thankless role in that movie. It really is.
He's sort of fourth wall in the whole thing, and he's thrust out there, and I guess the makeup's pretty good and everything, but that part, the way it's written and the accent he's doing,
is the makeup good? He looks like a melting candle.
He does. Yeah, you're right. I take it back.
It's unpleasant.
But It should be, but should he be playing him? I don't know.
Well, but here's the thing that we kind of haven't talked about, and we've also kind of avoided it, but you brought it up already a little bit by the Mr. Banks movie. I can't think of another actor who's played so many real people.
Yeah, he keeps churning them out, right? That pilot guy, and then
Sullenberger, yeah.
Sully, and then he did
Captain Phillips.
And then what's his name? The Castaway. That was a real guy. And
was that a real guy?
Polar Express guy. That was real.
Okay, swear to fucking God. Now you're just fucking with me.
remember when he saved Private Ryan back in the war?
I remember when he was a living toy.
These are all real people, dude.
Woody and Buzz. I've seen them. And what's crazy is that do you remember what his first real person role was?
His first real person? Oh,
like
he played who was an actual historical figure.
Mm-hmm. So the Ron Howard movie.
Yes. Was that Jim Lovell?
Yeah.
See, I wanted to answer it really flippantly, but then, I liked his performance in that movie a lot.
I like that movie. That movie's good. It's very, workman-like, but I think a movie like that needs it to be interesting.
The criticism of that movie is, I know that the time that they were up there wasn't really time to think, right? But for me as an audience member, I wanted one moment of panic from some of them, one of them, any of them. One moment of, this is how I die, and then getting back to work. And I don't know,
but you and I were talking about this before we started recording the documentary about the volcanologist. They made peace with it. If you're an astronaut, you make peace with it. I don't think you're worried about it. Like, you step in that, dude, I'm not stepping in that shuttle without, first off, no fucking way would I have stepped in that fucking thing in that time and done any of that. The balls on those people are fucking sitting on them. They're so big. But for fuck's sake, I mean, I get what you're getting at, but I think it also
as a human, like, you can make peace with whatever on Earth. You know what I mean?
On Earth.
You're suddenly in a tin can hurtling around in outer space. Yeah. And there's a very good possibility that you ain't coming back. There might be a moment where you're like, oh, wow, what this is, I don't know.
This is how I die.
Yeah, this is how I die. Maybe see them make peace with it there. I don't know. I'm speaking dramatically. It doesn't have to happen in these movies. It didn't happen in the movies. What did happen in this movie, I want to point out one thing. During the course of the movie, Chris Makepeace's character, JJ, not the letters, by the way, not J period, J period. His name is J-A-Y space J-A-Y. Anyway, when he starts, he masterminds an idea to do a live action role playing game. That's not a thing, is it? LARPing? Anyway.
He was ahead of the times, baby.
So he populates this cave with like torches and treasure, and he goes to a medical student that he knows so he can get a skeleton for a skeleton gag he's going to do. The medical student that he gets it from is a guy named Clark Johnson. And my jaw hit the floor seeing how young he was in this movie, because I know him from the mid-90s television series Homicide: Life on the Street. That was Meldrick Lewis, one of the detectives on the show. And he is now a really fantastic television director. He also made that movie SWAT, the Colin Farrell update. Yeah, which I think is actually a really good movie. So anyway, I just wanted to point out Clark Johnson, because I love that guy, and he was fun in this too. Like one of the bright points in Mazes and or Monsters.
I don't know. I think the high point of the movie is Tom Hanks wandering New York City, stabbing people. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Malone was taking a drink of water and it almost went everywhere. The visual alone is really arresting for Tom Hanks to just be holding a knife out at someone looking like a baby, like just like the most baby-faced Tom Hanks, like, I'm gonna stab you, man. It's like, come on, Forrest, don't do that.
Holding a tiny pocket knife. I mean, it wasn't tiny. It was enough to stab somebody, but basically the kind of pocket knife, it's a foldable pocket knife. He's holding it in two hands, and his hands are thrust out in front of him. Like like as if it's a sword.
Well,
It was very unusual. But I do want to say the shots of him wandering dazed around New York City, around Times Square and everything. You can tell that the whole movie was shot in like Toronto, but they got to do 2 days maybe in New York. So they spent one day just following Tom Hanks wandering. Like I was wondering the entire time, do they have permits even? Because all the passersby, like at one point, some guy like walks over to him and starts like trying to talk to him. And I'm like, that guy is not an extra. All those shots are great. And then they go to like some backlash so they can stab the punks. Those are the character names for those two guys. Punk number 1, punk number 2. Although they look nothing like punks. Maybe they just meant punk in the traditional sense.
Not played by Brian Johnson and Bill Paxton.
No, unfortunately.
Or Brian Thompson and Bill Paxton, I
Nothing clean, right?
Laundry Day. God. So speaking of Bill Paxton, because again, I don't know if we'll get to do the Circle episode, but I want to mention it. Worst thing about that movie is it's Bill Paxton's last movie where he's playing someone who has MS the entire movie. And it's so hard to watch. And I know Bill Paxton didn't die of MS. He didn't have MS, but it's like, that was his last movie. And it's like, oh man, this movie has like more strikes against it than it probably deserves, but. Oof.
Oh, speaking of strikes against things, how did you love the soundtrack to this movie?
I'm a huge fan of Ha Good Hardy.
Ha Good Hardy and his horrible, horrible Friends song sung by somebody named is it Judy Lander or Landers?
Judith Lander. It sounded like a Rankin and Bass movie song.
It's so bad. It's maddening, and it plays over and over. When I saw that it was co-written by somebody named Judy Lander, I went, no, not like Audrey and Judy Landers. And then I had to look it up, and it's not one of the beautiful and talented Landers sisters. It's somebody else entirely, because this would be a black strike against her. Like, it's a terrible song. You know, the other thing, weird sound-wise, anytime they had like a Foley sound for people walking, footsteps, it sounded like it was like they put it in an echo chamber with some slapback on it. It was really unusual, like clickety clackety clickety clackety clickety. Like I think they were trying to show us or make us hear the how big the room that they were in was, but it was just so distracting.
I don't know if that was any better than the production design behind the man standing at the end of a sewer drain. Jesus at the end of a sewer drain. I don't know how else to describe those shots other than Tom Hanks hallucinating someone backlit at the end of a sewer drain.
Sewer drain, and you can tell it's like a plastic sewer drain that they're lighting. So all the ribs of this plastic tube with that guy standing at the other end. You're like, the voice is Tom Hanks, right? They've just modified it just a little bit, so that's him talking to himself, which I actually kind of liked. I loved all those dream sequences, like Tom Hanks running in place, screaming for some brother with like a wind machine and a fog machine going, and they've got this iris light on him. It's so cheesy. I don't know. I dug those sequences.
It is the Great Hall, where the Great Hall is a person. Oh, so can we talk about Tom Hanks's character a little bit more, because we're going to have to talk about the ending eventually, and even if we don't want to.
If there is a plot going on here, it's about Tom Hanks. So yes, we should probably get into that plot.
So Tom Hanks is missing his brother who disappeared on Halloween.
It's his older brother.
Right.
And his brother was born on Halloween. It was what was his 14th or 15th birthday? Something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
And Tom Hanks is a few years younger than him. On the night of the party, his brother disappeared, and nobody had seen hide nor hair of him since. And then Tom Hanks reveals that, the night before, his brother came to him and said, I got to go to New York. Give me all your money. And he did. And now he's been carrying this guilt ever since, because apparently his brother, I think he started writing to him or would call him from New York, and then that went away. And obviously his brother was probably dead now. And he feels this tremendous guilt that he aided his brother in what is his potential demise. There we go.
What an interesting and strange plot point to put in this movie.
It's a little detailed.
Yeah.
Then, okay, we'll go with that. I mean, it seems like it might have just been his father is missing. His father is also named Hall, by the way. His father went to New York and went missing, and he somehow blames himself. That also would have worked. A little less elaborate, but, go ahead.
I mean, I love that his father's name is Hall Wheeling.
All wheeling or Robbie wheeling.
Yeah. Wheeling me out of this movie on a fucking stretcher because I am having a hard time comprehending it. It's shocking to me that this is the story they wanted to tell in this kind of movie, and that this is the story Rona Jaffe wanted to tell. Because like it's just so not at odds with what they're trying to tell otherwise, but the lengths that they've gone to try to land this part of the story almost makes us forget that there was anything else going on in this movie, and makes it feel like a different movie altogether.
Here's what I think happened. I think Rona Jaffe was trying to write a novel about a kid who feels guilty that he aided his older brother running away and he eventually died, and wanted to write a story about the blowback that occurs in, you know, your early adulthood and how you process that, but couldn't find a hook. And then suddenly this case shows up with the kid at the University of Michigan and his connection to Dungeons and Dragons. She went, perfect, and put it in there. Because it just feels so out of left field for if it's a story about these Dungeons and Dragons kids and its effect on the psyche of those who are lost.
And I guess I wonder if there could have been, again, there is a better movie here, but I just wonder why they thought why Rona Jaffe thought to do both, because it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It really feels at odds with itself towards the end of the movie. And then the movie tries to put a nice little bow on it at the end. And boy, that doesn't feel earned. Calm down, movie. You didn't earn this ending. That doesn't really work, but it really feels like it's landing something. It feels like it has something to say at the end.
Well, which climax are we talking about?
the final climax of them all meeting with him at his house.
And he has completely lost his mind and he's trapped in this world. And they humor him and then they feel okay about themselves because they know that they at least gave him some adventure, right? And what I wrote in my notebook was these three assholes hounded him into playing this game when he effectively begged them not to. And then while they're driving to visit him, they're all just bragging to one another about how great their lives are going to be now. Fantastic. And then it is like, it's a good sobering moment when they realize that Robbie's not okay and that he's going to be fucked up. And maybe they had they had a lot of cause for it. But
maybe you say.
No, I'm saying maybe because I think they process it in that way. They just think like, oh, fuck, poor Robbie. None of these characters are examining their role in helping this along. They all feel like heroes at the end. Like they went and talked to their grandma for 20 minutes, you know, like everything's cool now, you know?
We visited her in hospice care and now we don't have to see her again until the end of the year.
I saw grandma for 20 minutes at the old folks home. Like, I'll see you in 3 months, grandma.
That's why when I say like, it feels like it's earning the ending. It's like, okay, it feels like it earns these characters having a good life, but also the other character, the Tom Hanks character, being hoisted on the petard of their good lives. Like he's the one who has to pay for all the bad decisions that they made. And it's like, he's the only character that's halfway relatable.
Yeah. And I wouldn't care if any of these characters were shouldering 1/5 of the guilt that Tom Hanks had before his psychotic break, you know?
Yeah, because he's clearly troubled. Like, again, they're writing it rather heavy-handed that he has some sort of mental condition. He sees that monster, the Gorville that Kevin Peter Hall plays. He sees it. It's not just, you know, oh, there's a monster there. Imagine it. He's seeing it walking around. So he's clearly struggling with actual mental issues that are being exacerbated by him being in a fucking cave. Like, it's right.
So they go on this little LARP adventure and they're separated in this cave. By the way, if you're going to go ahead and install all of these torches and props and stuff, put in a sound system. Like
just calling from the edge of the
exactly, cupping his hands over his mouth and going, "There's a monster!" Like, hopefully they heard you. Who knows where they are in this series of caves that apparently stretch so far that in the end of the movie, the police are like, "We're not going any further. It goes on forever. He's in there. He's dead." Like maybe give everyone an earpiece or a walkie-talkie. I don't know.
I mean, I am more interested in watching characters go into the mine cavern, whatever, that they have been into, and then pretending to get lost to once again create conflict that doesn't need to be there. Because Wendy Crewson just goes into the caves at one point. For what reason? I'm still not sure.
It's really odd. Yeah. Like they make it seem like she's gone to find Daniel, like because she finds Daniel or he finds her. And then he's like, I suppose you're wondering why I was at the cave. Like, I guess as an audience, we're supposed to infer that she was wondering and knew he was there. And that's why she went. Otherwise, it makes no sense. But that previous thing we were talking about when we get the game for the first time, Tom Hanks is off by himself and there's a Gorville on the way and he imagines the Gorville emerge. Now, that mask, the creature design is actually really good with the Gorville.
I agree.
When it comes crawling out of the darkness, it's genuinely frightening. The problem is, and we experienced this over on Midnight Viewing, our Night Gallery podcast recently, we were talking about an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, Pickman's Model, where the monster design is fucking phenomenal, but they have it lit like daylight and running around and full view, whereas just show us a little. And it's so effective. And
at least this creature didn't skip leg day.
That's true.
Or the makeup design didn't skip leg day.
Right. The limitations of that costume become evident only because they're showing it way too much. Otherwise, it was a really good monster. But at that moment, he's Pardue now for the rest of the movie, right? This is Robbie Wheeler no longer exists.
That was my interpretation towards the, like, I guess, halfway point. Is like, this is his moment of like, yep, I've committed and I've committed hard.
But what doesn't make sense to me in this scenario is he's still going to classes, you know, he's still like eating at the cafeteria. He's not talking to everyone like Pardue. I mean, in a way he is, but like, you know, he's not trying to pay with jewels at, you know, out of this little sack he has on his hip when he's going to like get a burger or anything, right?
I don't think so. But then again, we do see him wandering New York, just starving for days, I guess.
Right. But that's after he's gone to New York because there's of course a Halloween party sequence echoing when Hall, his brother, went away on Halloween and now he's going to go away too. Like, to me, that would have been the moment where it should have been like full blown.
Well, he shows up dressed like the character.
Right. And that's, I actually like that shot of him sort of wandering through the party and that, like, the cerements of the grave, you know, like that's really good. But that's all because of Tom Hanks in that weirdo situation. But oh boy, Chris Makepeace never makes me want to stop punching him with all of his themed parties.
He's just a hip, cool guy who likes to do funky, quirky things. And he's that one quirky. I think it's more of an issue that person is in a lot of ways like the person that I am and that you are, but not that obnoxious asshole who has no self-awareness. Because he's a quirky, weird guy, but like no self-awareness about it whatsoever.
And no refinement either.
I'm just going to wear it's because he's wearing that goddamn helmet without the khaki, isn't it? Isn't it?
I wrote down all the hats. He wears a pith helmet, a hard hat, a cowboy hat, a little like fedora, the tiny fedoras we saw in Vogue like maybe 6-7 years ago. Remember all those? Those are horrible. He's got an aviator hat with goggles. When he wears that, he wears a little scarf, so that one is redeemed. He's at least themed as far as down to the neck. And later on, he will wear the full aviator costume when he goes to scout the cave. And in that point, during that part of the movie, I was fully on board with JJ as a character. But you can't go walking around in a fucking Eyes-On shirt and a Kaiser helmet and not be screaming for attention in the most obvious and sort of raw and sad way possible.
Notice me. Like, we notice you. We got it.
Good Lord.
People of that age, I guess, that like people that are doing that now, it's like,
Look, says the guy with green hair. I mean,
got him. Self-burn. All right. One for Father Malone's own self-owning chart. Jesus.
I'm not.
But
above.
It's green hair that looks good. You're not walking around like the Joker all day. I mean, if you were, you'd probably have your own TikTok channel where you did it.
I know, right? And I have 1 billion viewers or something.
And you do that. I want to do the Leto one day and the Ledger one the next day, and I could dress up as all of them.
Oh my God, what a life!
Oh, let's do the Cesar Romero one day. You could do it all.
Ugh. All right, I gotta go.
Why else do you have green hair? Why else was he wearing his little Lindbergh outfit? That's all I could think when I saw him. He's like the cutest little Lindbergh walking around.
boy, what's her name's room is a dorm room.
Supposedly.
It's got like ferns hanging in there and like luxurious draperies and stuff. I'm like, is she what?
Tom Hanks gets a double bed in his room. He's like, no, we can live together. It's like, you're in college.
Yeah.
This is a dorm room, ding dong.
How about we're sophomores?
Like Tom Hanks, I think you're out of touch with reality in the most basic of ways, it would seem.
Yeah, how about you just say like, these are gender specific housing we have here. I can't live in here. What are you talking about?
I think it would have behooved, as the word would be put, the movie if Tom Hanks had been an out of touch rich kid as well. Like really play up the rich kid angle of the movie. Because they kind of hint at that, right? Like he's well off and like that. And like, oh, he's a rich kid. He has nothing to worry about other than oppressive mental health problems. Like, okay. Like
Chris Makepeace is a rich kid too. And they make that clear from the outset. Because when we meet him in his Kaiser helmet, he's coming to his like Manhattan brownstone home, and his mother, who is like clearly the height of socialite, and she's redecorating the house over and over again. She has completely tiled his bedroom, and he freaks because all his stuff is gone. I wouldn't want to walk on that tile because it would be very cold. That room was fucking awesome.
So was the room that was second designed as well.
The one that he loves that looks like the set of Casablanca, or like, some sort of desert movie. Absolutely.
Dr. Benway. That's all I could think of. I was thinking William S. Burroughs sitting in the corner of that room, just injecting heroin into his scrotum, which, I think of more often than not.
Chris Makepeace, they make clear is a rich kid. His parents are, we can tell Robbie, Tom Hanks' character's parents are well off from the car they're driving and how well appointed they are.
And they have rich people problems. They're drunks. That's only something rich people would do, or really poor people, according to movie logic.
But I was unprepared for the level of wealth when they come to his house at the end. I thought when they're pulling up, I thought like, oh, he's in an asylum. And then I realized like, oh no, this is a residence. That giant structure is a house. The gigantic barn beside it is another thing. And then they have a full estate out back with a lake. Tom Hanks' character is like richer than rich. That doesn't diminish the fact that he's a suffering person who, is going through this thing about his brother and the guilt. And that's all horrible. But like, it's like, I don't think they leaned in that direction earlier. And
not hard enough, in my opinion, because that's an interesting thing to mine.
Yeah, like
everything else has a lot of anytime you have a character like this in something else, they always do. It's always a component of the character.
I would have liked to have known that he was that rich because I knew Chris Makepeace's character was rich, and his problems were he was so lonely and he couldn't fit in, which I can relate to. But at the same time, he was a 16-year-old dickhead in college.
I wouldn't want to stand out the way he did if I were 16 in college. Like, I don't think I'd be wearing my Kaiser helmet, because then everybody would be like, oh, it's the 16-year-old who also wears a Kaiser helmet.
You can't wear the Kaiser helmet and then go back to your dormitory with your talking minor bird and say, oh, woe is me, I wish I were dead. If you've made the choice to wear the Kaiser helmet, your attitude ought to be, fuck all y'all. I don't care what any of your opinion is. I'm wearing a Kaiser helmet.
And I'm 16 in college. Dude, as long as you keep it up, you'll be fine. 30 years later, JJ Brockway owns Amazon.com. You know what I mean? Like that, or he's the next. I mean, again, like he's Richard Garfield is what he is. Like he's the dude who would make Magic the Gathering, or you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of character that he's written as. Except
he's completely irredeemable, and he's the actual villain of the movie because he forces Tom Hanks' character to participate in this goddamn game and then ups it, takes it up a whole other notch only because he's bored with the way that they're playing it then. And
honestly, if you look at it that way, this movie is a lot more interesting.
Yeah, Tom Hanks is a victim of Chris Makepeace's predatory nature.
This movie takes on a whole new light.
It's the whole thing about World War II and the Vichy government in France.
It's actually about the integration of the NBA and whatever that NBA that wasn't the NBA was at the time. That's all this is about. This is just a parable for that.
It could be those things. It's better than the horrible condemnation of people who just want to get together sometimes and have fun in a creative, imaginative way that, breeds, people making skills and sociability and problem solving and camaraderie. Yeah, no, it's satanic and it will make you lose touch with reality.
Well, what I don't understand is if the movie had made it clear by the end of it that it's taking a stance that our three characters that aren't Tom Hanks are the problem, they would never have ended the movie the way that they did, but they're the heroes of the piece. And he is the victim of, like we've said, their whatever, because again, they forced him, but they were like, hey, I heard you really like this thing. It's like offering a drug addict who's recovering something like, hey, want to do heroin together? Like, no. How many times does someone have to say no before you leave them alone? Like,
they hound him.
Right.
There are several scenes over what could be days or weeks where they just keep hammering him to join their little group because they need a fourth. They're villains. All three.
And then the way the movie ends is, hey, isn't it kind of sad that you are now mentally lost to the world and we're never going to visit you again either? Because that's the implication that I really have a hard time stomaching is they go, we played the game again for one last time. Yeah, and then they probably never visited him again.
Ever again. But we got this golden sunset shot. Everything is hazy and wonderful and warm, and he's okay. He's lost in his own wonderful fantasy world. Isn't that great?
No, it's so awful. And like, it speaks to a genuine misunderstanding of the ideas behind what, like you've already mentioned, what makes Dungeons and Dragons actually something worth playing, because you get a group of friends together and you do something together that is fun, not three people making one person literally lose their goddamn mind who was already had a tenuous grasp on reality at best. Clearly, he was on the edge. He's a man on the edge, and all he needed was a little just blow on him, and he'll just caterwaul into the void of magical creatures.
And here's how you know that they actually are the villains of the piece. Tom Hanks' character has a complete break with reality. He believes that if he gets to the two towers in some mythical land, that he can reach the Great Hall. His brother was named Hall. He went to New York where the Twin Towers are, right? So he's now the character. He's on his quest. He goes to New York City, gets jumped by some toughs, some punks, kills one of them. No, he doesn't kill him. He just stabs that kid's going to be fine. He just got one little stab. He'll be okay. So he didn't he'll be fine.
Sure.
One little stab. He didn't murder anyone. Okay. He goes to a payphone. The stabbing has reawakened Tom Hanks, not Pardue, the cleric or whatever. He goes to the phone and calls his former girlfriend, Kate, and tells her, I'm in New York. I don't know how I got here. My knife has blood on it. My hands have blood on it. I don't know what I'm doing. He's great in that scene, though. I know I made fun of him because I'm a little dickhead, but he's really good in the scene. Anyway, and she's like, where are you? Okay, well, you should go to such and such's house, and we'll be there as soon as we can. And then it cuts to like later the next morning. It was at like midnight that he made that phone call. We see the next day the sun is fully up, and they're like, did they go have breakfast and shit first? Chris.
It's not a concern, brother.
You called me from Nebraska and said, I'm in a phone booth. I don't know how I got here, and I have blood on my knife, and I don't know what to do. Please help me. I would be, I would get on a plane, I guess, but like, if we were in driving distance, which these characters clearly are, that college is in upstate New York, and so they just got to drive to New York City. So you're maybe 2 hours from me. You would see me in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Fuck those characters. They should be in jail or something. They should at least be pondering for the rest of their lives what a horrible thing they did.
Well, we haven't even mentioned, there's a point where Murray Hamilton, who again, I can't believe he's in this movie. It's like somebody like, we're like, hey, we want fucking free catering, like free craft service for the afternoon. Come be in our movie. There's a point where they're like, we can't be tied to this because it'll ruin our lives. So we're going to go and we're going to just show up at the crime scene because again, they think that he's down in the forbidden unknown off-limits Pequod mines, according to Chris Makepeace. They go and put Serpico style in an envelope the cave maps that only go as far as this moron fucking went into the caves with his rice that Wendy Crewson mistaked for magical herbs, and they go, we can't be tied to this crime where Tom Hanks may actually be fucking dead, which would be totally our fault. So we're just going to show up at the crime scene and put it on the windshield, and we'll call it good. Fuck you guys. Like, well, what? These are just the biggest shithead characters possible.
Tom Hanks's character has disappeared. They know he's disappeared, and they know he's been disappeared for at least 2 days already. And then they waste 2 days obfuscating their crimes. Instead of just saying, yeah, we played a game in that cave. We think he might be in there. Here's our map to the cave. Our friend's life means something to us, rather than my rich boy. I'm 16 years old at a fucking university. If I get expelled from this university, is my life over? This university, by the way, seems like a demotion for Tom Hanks's character. So what does Chris Makepeace give a shit other than he's a narcissistic little prick just like the other two? They are complicit in what would have been his death.
Honestly, I wish the movie were as good as what we were describing. This movie, like, if we're talking about this movie the way we've been talking about it, it seems like a much more interesting movie, because everything that we've talked about sounds like a movie I would watch again, and I have no interest in ever revisiting this movie.
No, the movie that they presented, those characters are heroes.
Right. It's
they were sort of blind to their own the truth of their story.
But that's because the movie lets them be. The narrative of the movie is that they are the heroes, right? Because again, and we played the game again for one last time. You left your friend who is now completely lost it just at his house, and you're like, well, we're gonna go and be Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and fucking,
I finally started writing my book about the horrible things I just did.
Like, good God, movie, what? You know what? You're going to be on the wrong side of this. Like that's this like, you're on the wrong side of this, guys, big time. And you know what's crazy? The Circle, the movie that, again, I don't know if we'll get to talk about it this month. It feels the same way. It's like it feels the same way about social media that this movie does, where it's like your take on this is going to age really poorly if it hasn't already. Like, it's already aged poorly the moment it was on screen. This is a muddle-headed, misguided take on it. The Circle was more like more misguided than muddle-headed. This movie I think if they had just dropped all the Dungeons and Dragons shit, or mazes and monsters, I think it would have been a better movie. I think it would have been a movie. It wouldn't have been anything with a poster with Tom Hanks and the rest of the cast dressed up like characters from Dungeons and Dragons, but it would have just been a run-of-the-mill made-for-TV psychological drama. That's not as interesting. I get it.
Yeah, like I said, it feels like she turned in a draft of this novel and they went, okay, but this is just sort of run-of-the-mill stuff. This is, it's not that good. Jazz it up. And then suddenly Dungeons and Dragons, baby. Like, because it would play if these kids got together over, motocross or, right.
Any obsessive anything can be.
Knitting circle. And he got obsessed with knitting and all he thought about was knitting. And then one day he was knitting and knitting and knitting.
And he knitted his friends. He knitted 3 friends and they go into his house and they're like, hey, you want to hang out? I am hanging out with you. And it's just yarn people sitting on a couch.
Did you notice that the dorms all had like at then current movie posters, but all sort of obscured so the titles wouldn't show, so there were no copyright issues? There was a Road Warrior poster behind a fridge, and then in JJ's room, he had a Blade Runner poster, but it only showed like the bottom third of, and the credits were lopped off, so you just got a little bit of Blade Runner.
I used to have a Blade Runner poster on the door of my parents' house, and I've seen that movie poster so many times. And seeing it in this movie was like, right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I remember now why we can't see the whole thing, but I know what this is.
I'm glad they went for it and just didn't go like, hey, what does CBS own? Like.
I can't believe this was a TV movie. Like, what a time to be alive, to have Tom Hanks in a TV movie, folks.
I read about the sort of production. Like, they filmed it in, I believe, November of 1982, and it premiered in December of 1982. So that's pretty impressive. It's basically a 2-hour movie shot on location.
It would have been a lot more impressive if it was actually really good.
Oh, yeah, that would have been really impressive.
I mean, they made a movie, so, there is that. It was edited together competently.
I want to congratulate them on the competent job they did. I did think that cave set was really good looking, actually.
Oh, really? I thought you were going to say it looked set bound as fuck, because that's the way I felt.
I thought the set itself actually looked really good. I thought the problem was not the set. I thought the problem was the lighting.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Wendy Crewson thinking rice was herbs.
No, I mean, that's just a general problem for Wendy Crewson. We all know that. Speaking of Wendy Crewson, she's on this Canadian show. What's the name of it? Oh, it's Pretty Hard Cases, which is this like a cop comedy. She's like plays the commander. She's great in it, and that's a great show. Pretty Hard Cases. Everybody go watch it.
Huh. I like her. I like her in The Santa Claus. That's a movie I've seen every year since it came out. And she's endearing as the mom in that, and she's fine here. But yeah.
She reminds me of in close-up sometimes. She reminds me of Melody Anderson. You know who Melody Anderson is?
Mm-mm.
Flash Gordon.
Oh, okay, sure.
Flash Gordon fans will understand what I just said. If they know both movies, I guess. I don't know. There are moments where she spit an image of Melody Anderson. It was weird.
Her and Tom Hanks definitely come away from this as the least problematic actors with roles. Because I mean, again, like,
no, they're both good.
Yeah. And they're still working. So
all the parents are great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think
guy at the end when Tom Hanks is beneath the subway tunnels, like the tunnels that are way down and runs into that guy. That guy is great. I like that guy. That whole scene very much reminded me of The Fisher King.
The Gilliam movie.
Yeah. And the conversation between those two guys, when this homeless guy who could potentially be a threat or whatever, like realizes that he's crazy and he's playing this character and just sort of humors him, was a nice moment in the movie. That's two good things in this movie. Vera Miles playing drunk really well, and that interaction between those two characters.
Yeah, and I like the subtext of it as well. I appreciate a scene with some good subtext.
Subway subtext.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah, I would ask you what your favorite Tom Hanks performance is, but we've already answered that question earlier this month. So what movie is better?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, well, I asked you when we did The Burbs, didn't I?
No, you did. No, did you? My answer was that it was That Thing You Do, right?
Yeah, I think you said that was the best thing he's done.
Right, and I maintain that. That's not his best performance. His performance in That Thing You Do is it's good. It's good for the movie, but it's not the best thing I've seen from Tom Hanks as an actor.
It's Brian Epstein, kind of, right?
Oh, That Thing You Do?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what it's supposed? I don't know, like
no, not real Brian Epstein. More like almost like a Phil Spector-y kind of a thing, you know.
Yeah, with a lot less gun pulling on people.
Right. Well, he's working up to that. That guy
he'll get there.
Yeah. What's his name? Mr. White?
Mr. White, who apparently was supposed to be gay, and in the extended version of the movie, he is gay.
That's true. He is, isn't he? Yeah.
What movie is better for having Tom Hanks in it?
Like a movie that might have been bad had he not been in it?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, yeah.
Yeah. That Polar Express movie?
Interesting. Okay.
I don't like that movie, but it would be unwatchable if it were not for his performance in it. To me,
interesting.
It was just a bunch of dead-eyed, soulless nightmare creatures. But at least Tom Hanks is one of those, so you feel okay.
Yeah. That movie is a horrifying nightmare. Like I like that and the Grendel movie or Beowulf. You remember that? Like Zemeckis tried, and he tried twice. 3 times. No, he tried 3 times. The Polar Express, Beowulf, and A Christmas Carol. He tried, folks. He put his best foot forward more times than most people do. Because most of the time when you get hit in the face with a rake after the first time, you don't do it a second time. And you really don't do it a third.
Didn't he do Mars Needs Moms too?
Oh my God. So it was 4? Oh God, no, there's no way. No, that can't be right.
Robert Zemeckis, he tried to run before he could walk. And I love him for it, but those are terrible. The problem with those 4 movies is that their poor performance canceled his remake of Yellow Submarine, which was happening. And I would give anything to have seen Robert Zemeckis' remake of Yellow Submarine in 3D animation with the cast he had assembled, including, what's his name? Peter Serafinowicz.
Oh, yeah.
as Paul McCartney. Oh my God, it would have been fantastic. But then I think when Mars Needs Moms failed, they were like, okay, fuck it, we're not doing 3D animated movies.
He did not make Mars Needs Moms. It was the Christmas Carol, Beowulf, and Polar Express.
Was he involved in the production in some way of Mars Needs Moms?
I don't see.
Same studio. Is it the same studio?
I mean, that was a Disney movie.
What was?
Mars Needs Moms.
Ooh, okay, maybe he has nothing to do with it.
But it had that same fucking thing where it's like digital actors. Look, I get it, but it doesn't work. The Uncanny Valley is why we have that term. That movie is the Uncanny Valley. Defined. I don't need to see a CGI Tom Hanks because it looks like Tom Hanks, but it's not Tom Hanks. But it is Tom Hanks. But this is weird and off-putting. Get it away from me, please. Hologram for a King was the other Dave Eggers movie that he was in because The Circle was a Dave Eggers book that had been adapted. Cool.
Oh, okay. I don't know where you land on this movie.
Oh, here we go. I'm excited now. This movie is already in front of me, but yet I am excited for what you're going to say.
His performance in Castaway, I think, is really a marvel.
I have seen it one time in the theaters. It is not something we're rewatching this month, but I would be interested to rewatch it solely for the fact that there are very few movies like that movie out there, which is one guy doing it. Like if it's not a masterclass in acting, then I don't know what it would be. How else could anyone remember that movie so fondly if he wasn't good in it? Like I would be willing to give it a chance only because it's him on an island by himself for effectively 2 hours. Yeah,
and it's great. And he's great in it. And I loved that guy. And then he made me love a volleyball. I fucking cried my eyes out when Wilson went away because Tom Hanks was crying because Wilson went away. That didn't feel, and it felt earned. And I don't know, because I loved that guy because Tom Hanks fucking pulled that performance off.
And that's a Zemeckis movie.
It is. There we go. They can do it well together when they want to.
I mean, would you not say that one of the performances that he is known for is a Robert Zemeckis movie? It's the one
the most famous, right?
Yeah, well, let me ask you. Here's the best question to bring this episode to a close. What are they going to show in the memoriam for Tom Hanks? It's got to be Forrest Gump, right?
Yeah, it's going to be
the feather.
It's going to be the feather flying away. Yeah, that last Robert Zemeckis directed the in memoriam for Tom Hanks.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, look, say what you will about that movie. I haven't watched it yet, and it's the final movie of this month. But
you haven't seen it?
I've seen it a long time ago. Like when I was like between 10 and 15 is when I saw it. That's not a good time to see that movie.
I remember vividly going to see that movie. I remember the events around going to see it more than the movie itself. No, I'm not a Forrest Gump hater. I like that movie. I mean,
I've heard you talk effusively about parts of that movie before.
Yes, look, I'm a softie, and I particularly nowadays I cry at the drop of a hat. But at one point in my life, it was very hard to make me cry to crack that nut, you know. And it had to feel non-manipulated. That's the thing. I was always on guard for manipulated, like we just want to squeeze some tears out of you moments in movies. And I felt like there are some moments in Forrest Gump that don't feel in any way manipulative. It feels genuine with those characters and what they're going through. And it just, some of those scenes just kill me.
I'm looking forward to rewatching it. I wonder how it's aged because again, like I read the book last year and the book was interesting and I enjoyed the book a lot more than I thought I was going to. But, you know, it's a movie that has a lot of weird things that it does and specifically doesn't do, actually. So, but that will be the thing that gets played for Tom Hanks. I don't know what else, maybe Philadelphia, but I mean, Forrest Gump is like, that's it. Like, that's the Tom Hanks role, I think.
It's the one to be, he's known for and will be remembered for, certainly. But, you know, he's done a lot of stuff. He was in a couple of episodes of Family Ties right around the same time period where he played this alcoholic uncle who at one point like slaps Michael J. Fox in a drunken rage. And then later on he comes back and he's like on the run from the feds. Yeah. No joke, on Family Ties. He's great in it. He He, as a matter of fact, Tom Hanks, this is historic. He was the only person to ever like lay out the Fonz on Happy Days.
Oh, really?
Plays a character who had somehow been humiliated by the Fonz or something like in the past and had gone and like studied karate, and he shows up in like a full gi and he kicks the Fonz and the Fonz goes flying out through a plate glass window.
Huh. You remember Tom Hanks directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt and was in it as well? You remember that?
Yeah. You know, him kicking the Fonz through a diner window, that should be the in memoriam. That should be the piece. When the day comes, and I'm not in any way wishing for it, when the day comes, that's what I will post on social media, the image of Tom Hanks doing that to the Fonz. Like, that's what a badass Tom Hanks is, was, and will be.
What about Tom Hanks being thrown by Treat Williams through a TV? That's what happens in that Tales from the Crypt episode.
I'm less inclined to put that on.
He gets Matthew Lillarded, more or less. He'll totally be back, guys. You can survive having your head thrown into a giant electrical box.
Did you ever see that episode of there was a noir series. Showtime tried to copy the Tales from the Crypt model with noir, like detective things. Tom Hanks directed an episode of that and appears in it. And he plays like a villainous character. He's really good and scary.
I don't think they've done enough with Tom Hanks as a villain. Like, I think he has played more or less good people almost throughout, to the point where Carly Rae Jepsen has him in a music video that is more endearing than most things are. But like, that person never got to play the villains enough, because I feel like he has some energy that has never been tapped in that direction.
We've never seen him like stabbing someone to death.
I mean, he's not like a villain in That Thing You Do, but he's morally ambiguous a little bit.
No, he could. We've seen him play villains, but like there are untapped portions of Tom Hanks that could be mined before it's too late. I'd like to. You know what? He'd make a good Bond villain. I'd like to see him in a Bond movie, a hyper realistic Bond movie, as a matter of fact.
Oh, please say hyper realistic again. Chris Nolan's ears are perking up.
There he goes. He's gonna drop an entire nuclear explosion for one scene in a movie. He's that dedicated. He loves movies more than you. He shoots only on film. He won't even look at videotape. He doesn't own a television. He has a 16 millimeter projector in his pocket, and he has everything transferred to 16 millimeter.
If you watch his movie on your phone, you're literally. If you watch his movie on your phone, you're destroying cinema, and it's your fault.
Oh man, it is, and guess what, man? Your movies are mediocre.
I will never miss an opportunity to throw a little bit of shade. I can't do this. I can't do this nuclear blast CGI. Okay, we just can't do it.
Oh no, we have to actually go with the real stuff. Like, oh, in this scene, you're actually going to shoot and kill your co-star. Well, that's what happens in the script. Like,
this isn't an Alec Baldwin movie.
Oh yeah, no.
That's low hanging fruit.
Whoa, man, on the ground.
Not that low. Subterranean, maybe.
Subterranean.
So speaking of where he goes to talk to the homeless people.
What am I naive?
Father Malone, final thoughts on Mazes and Monsters.
If you are a Tom Hanks completist, watch the movie. If you want a travelogue of early 1980s New York, including an eerie travel sequence through the two World Trade Center, where the climax of the movie actually occurs, then you should watch this movie. If you're looking for in any way a decent drama, don't watch the movie. If you're looking for what anyone actually had as a good idea toward Dungeons and Dragons, don't watch this movie. This is what's frustrating about the movie is it doesn't go one way or another. Like we've said, the Dungeons and Dragons portions of the movie is just a MacGuffin to tell this other psychodrama that's going on. So it doesn't actually tap into the weird furor and slight mania about how Dungeons and Dragons was harming our children through Satan and demons and stuff, when that was the kind of real prevailing thought toward D&D at the time. Other than that, like, maybe don't watch this movie.
I think it was an interesting attempt at doing something unconventional with the idea of, RPGing in the 80s. But again, it kind of really falls into the worst kinds of traps of baiting people into feeling a certain way about something just because they don't understand it. And that's ultimately where the Dungeons and Dragons part of this movie feels like it's coming from the wrong place. It's coming from a place of, this is weird, I don't understand it, so it must be bad. And it's like, fuck you. That is not reality. And it's not reality now, and it wasn't reality then. You don't understand something, you don't understand it. That's it. And maybe if you educate yourself, you won't think that reading Harry Potter has to do with demons. It's written by an asshole. Maybe that's why you shouldn't read it. But don't think it's because it's going to summon the devil. And, I think the stuff that isn't that in this movie could be interesting. But then you get into the problem of the heroes of the piece in that portion of the movie are fucking horrifying human beings who don't understand the world that they live in or their place in. So, look, Tom Hanks is fine. Wendy Crewson is fine. And that's kind of it. And that's not a reason enough to watch an hour and 40 minutes of this. But you can find it. It just came out on Blu-ray last year, 40 years later, folks.
Oh, my God. The copy I watched was gorgeous.
Same. Immaculate.
The DVD version, like 25 years ago, felt like they had just like they used a videotape dub or something. Like there weren't even credits on it, if I remember correctly.
I remember the VHS that my grandparents had of this. CBS video of this. Yeah. I remember seeing it on their shelf and we never watched it. Or maybe we did and I don't remember. I remember the opening of this movie for whatever reason, but I don't remember anything else. Like, I don't know. Such a memorable opening.
Yeah. I think it works okay for the first third, maybe. Like if you've got 35 minutes to kill, then you should watch the first 35 of Mazes and Monsters. You get everything out of it that you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, it's fine, as they would say. It's fine. It's
as a made-for-TV movie. It's passable,
right? And ultimately that is kind of the bar it needs to be measured against. Is it's a made-for-TV movie that just happens to star Tom Hanks. And if it didn't have Tom Hanks, I don't think it would have gotten re-released on Blu-ray last year.
Probably not.
No. So on that note, Father Malone, where can people find you when you and I aren't talking about Tom Hanks fighting the Goreville?
You can find us talking about other things on other podcasts like Midnight Viewing, the Night Gallery podcast, or Chronicles from the Crypt, the Twilight Zone podcast. No, that's the other podcast. Dreams for Sale. They're all on weirdingwaymedia.com. Go find us all over there. Also, I have a show called Astounding Tales of the Public Domain. That's a narrative show. And the newest thing I'm working on is Noise Junkies with Mondo Heathers, Heather Drain, and Midnight. HP, who does the music for basically everything I'm involved in. Noise Junkies. It's a music podcast. We just did Vanity Projects, and actually it's pretty funny. So go check that one out.
I can't plug anything differently than you plugged, so exactly what Father Malone said. As for this, culturecast.com, patreon.com, all the places you can go to support the show financially. But if you get it on iTunes or wherever you get it, frankly, just like, rate, and review it there. Father Malone, thank you so much for bringing this movie to my attention as an adult. Finally sitting down to watch it. It was fun to talk about, that's for sure.
Worth the talk, not a watch.
And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.